Hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever season of the BTFL, or the Best Team Football League, powered by Tecmo Bowl. In this league, we have all of the best teams from every NFL franchise during the Super Bowl era. We have 22 Super Bowl winning teams, 8 Super Bowl runner-ups, and 4 teams that have never been to a Super Bowl. We will be doing the season simulation much like the classic NFL primetime highlights with Chris Berman and Tom Jackson, and we were inspired by the YouTube user Mr. NFL. Episodes will be released every Sunday during the offseason to keep people entertained. Now, without any further ado, I will present the names of the NFL teams and what year they came from. So the first team is the 2008 Arizona Cardinals, who were the Super Bowl 43 runner-up led by Ken Wisenhunt. They are the team in the BTFL with the worst record, but somehow, even though they had the worst record, they ended up as the 4th seed in the NFC playoffs back in 2008, where they defeated the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, and the Philadelphia Eagles on their way to a Super Bowl loss last minute to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The 2008 Arizona Cardinals have all-pro players like Larry Fitzgerald and have Hall of Famers on their team like Kurt Warner. The 2016 Atlanta Falcons were led by head coach Dan Quinn, ended up going 11-5, and were first place in the NFC South. They had MVP quarterback Matt Ryan, as well as Julio Jones and Vic Beasley. And they were run by Devontae Freeman as well. The Atlanta Falcons were the team that went against the Patriots in Super Bowl 51, and they were winning 28-3 in the third quarter before Tom Brady struck and rallied to beat the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are in the BTFL to prove that they are not choke artists. The next team is the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, led by head coach Brian Billick. They were Super Bowl 35 champions against the New York Football Giants, but they have a stout defense led by linebacker Ray Lewis, Sam Adams, and Rod Woodson. The 1990 Buffalo Bills ended their season 13-3 with head coach Marv Levy and were runners-up in Super Bowl 25. This is a team that is led by Hall of Fame quarterback Jim Kelly and all-pro players like Thurman Thomas and Bruce Smith. They even have Hall of Fame players like Andre Reed. The 2015 Carolina Panthers, with head coach Ron Rivera, had an MVP in Cam Newton and ended up facing the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 50 in Santa Clara, but were edged off by the Denver Broncos defense that was just much better than them. The Carolina Panthers are coming into this season with Cam Newton, of course, and players like Luke Kuechly and shutdown cornerback Josh Norman. The 1985 Bears ended their season 15-1, only losing to the Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football. They won Super Bowl 20 against the New England Patriots with head coach Mike Ditka and a strong defense that was led by Buddy Ryan. They have players like Walter Payton, they have Mike Singletary, and Richard Dent, as well as Jim McMahon, who ended up becoming a Pro Bowler that year. The 1988 Cincinnati Bengals were led by head coach Sam Weish. They went 12-4 and were first in the AFC Central. They ended up being runners-up in Super Bowl 23 against the San Francisco 49ers, and they have all pros on their team like Boomer Esiason. The 1987 Cleveland Browns were led by head coach Marty Schottenheimer, went 10-5 in the AFC Central, and ended up losing to the Denver Broncos in the AFC Championship game. They have Bernie Kosar on their team, which has been the best quarterback that the team has had since they got Baker Mayfield this year. The 1995 Dallas Cowboys ended 12-4 with their head coach Barry Switzer and won Super Bowl 30 in a revenge game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have all-pro players like Emmitt Smith, Nate Newton, and Darren Woodson. They even have players like Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, Jay Novacek, and Larry Allen, to name others. The 1998 Denver Broncos ended 14-2 and ended up beating the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl 33. Their head coach Mike Shanahan is the leader of their team, as well as Hall of Fame quarterback John Elway and all-pro players like Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharp, and other players like Ed McCaffrey and Bill Romanowski and Steve Atwater. Jason Elam was also their kicker, who ended up setting a record for the longest kick in NFL history at one point. The 1991 Detroit Lions ended their season 12-4. They don't really have very many star players, but Barry Sanders, who is a Hall of Famer, does stand out as being probably one of the best running backs in the 90s. The 1996 Green Bay Packers ended their season 13-3 and won the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots with head coach Mike Holmgren, quarterback Brett Favre, and defensive end Reggie White. The 2012 Houston Texans ended 12-4 as leaders in the AFC South with head coach Gary Kubiak. They are a strong defense with players like J.J. Watt and Jonathan Joseph. And they also have a lot of speed on the offensive side of the ball with Arian Foster and big-name receiver Andre Johnson. The 2006 Indianapolis Colts went 12-4 and were first in the AFC South with a third seed in the AFC playoffs that year. They ended up winning Super Bowl 41 against the Chicago Bears, and their lone All-Pro player was Marvin Harrison, with Pro Bowlers like Peyton Manning, Reggie Wayne, and Jeff Saturday. The 1999 Jacksonville Jaguars ended their season 14-2 and lost in the AFC Championship game to the Tennessee Titans with head coach Tom Coughlin, with Pro Bowlers Mark Brunell, Jimmy Smith, and Kevin Hardy. The 1969 Kansas City Chiefs, led by Hank Stram, ended their season 11-3, second in the AFL West Division, and were Super Bowl IV champions against the Minnesota Vikings, and they were led by quarterback Len Dawson. The 1972 Miami Dolphins are the only NFL team to ever end their season with a perfect record throughout the regular season and the playoffs. They're led by head coach Don Shula. They have all-pro players like Earl Morrow and Pro Bowl players like Mercury Morris, Larry Zonka, and Paul Warfield. The 1972 Miami Dolphins won their Super Bowl against the Washington Redskins. The 1998 Minnesota Vikings were 15-1 and first in the NFC Central Division with coach Denny Green. They have all-pro players like Randall Cunningham and Randy Moss. They even have John Randall, Randall McDaniel, Chris Carter, and even kicker Gary Anderson, who unfortunately costed the Minnesota Vikings a chance to go to the Super Bowl after missing a short field goal against the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC Championship game. The 2004 New England Patriots ended their season 14-2 and first in the AFC East. They finished as Super Bowl 39 champions against the Philadelphia Eagles with head coach Bill Belichick, and they began a dynasty with Tom Brady. Their all-pro players are Richard Seymour, Adam Vinatieri. They have Pro Bowlers like Corey Dillon and Teddy Bruschi. The 2009 New Orleans Saints ended their season 13-3 and first in the NFC South. They won Super Bowl 44 against the Indianapolis Colts with head coach Sean Payton and future Hall of Fame quarterback Drew Brees. The 2007 New York Giants are the only team in the BTFL that ended their season as second in their division at a record of 10-6. They were a wild card team at the 6th seed with head coach Tom Coughlin, and their only Pro Bowl player was defensive end Osi Umenyiora. But not to worry, this is a team stacked with talent including Eli Manning, Plaxico Burress, Michael Strahan, Justin Tuck, so watch out for them. The 1968 New York Jets ended 11-3 and were first in the AFL East Division and won Super Bowl III against the Baltimore Colts. And they had Pro Bowlers like Joe Namath, Don Maynard, and Emerson Boozer. The 1976 Oakland Raiders ended their season 13-1, first in the AFC West with head coach John Madden, and won Super Bowl XI against the Minnesota Vikings. They had players like Ken Stabler, Cliff Branch, Dave Casper, and the only Hall of Fame kicker in NFL history, Ray Guy. The 2017 Philadelphia Eagles had a record of 13-3 and won Super Bowl 52 against the reigning Super Bowl champions, the New England Patriots, and had head coach Doug Peterson. They had Pro Bowl players like Carson Wentz, Zach Ertz, Jason Kelsey, and Fletcher Cox. The 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers included one of the better Pittsburgh Steelers teams with a record of 14-2, first in the AFC Central, and won Super Bowl 13 against the Dallas Cowboys with head coach Chuck Noll. They had Pro Bowl players like Terry Bradshaw, Lynn Swann, Mike Webster, and Franco Harris. The 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers are probably one of the best defensive teams in NFL history and actually drove the NFL to make rule changes that helped out the offense. The 1994 San Diego Chargers, led by Bobby Ross, put out a record of 11-5 and were first in the AFC West. They lost Super Bowl 29 to the San Francisco 49ers and had all-pro players like Junior Seau and John Carney at kicker. The 1989 San Francisco 49ers were first in the NFC West with a record of 14-2. They were Super Bowl 24 champions with head coach George Seifert, had Hall of Fame players like Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, and Ronnie Lott, as well as special players like John Taylor and Roger Craig. The 2013 Seattle Seahawks finished with a record of 13-3 and were first in the NFC West. They won Super Bowl 48 against the Denver Broncos in New Jersey with head coach Pete Carroll. Had all-pro players like Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas, as well as Pro Bowl players like Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch, who was nicknamed Beast Mode at the time. The 1999 St. Louis Rams ended with a record of 13-3, first in the NFC West, and were part of the gateway to the West, the gateway to the best, greatest show on turf. They won Super Bowl 34 with Dick Vermeil and Hall of Fame players like Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, Orlando Pace, and Hall of Fame caliber players like Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt against the Tennessee Titans and Steve McNair. The 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers ended their season at 12-4 and first in the NFC South with the second seed in the playoffs. They won Super Bowl 37 against the Oakland Raiders with head coach John Gruden, who once coached the Oakland Raiders the season before. This is a team packed with an amazing defense, led by players like Simeon Rice, Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, John Lynch, and Rondé Barber. They also had Mike Alstott, that was a prolific fullback in the National Football League. The 1999 Tennessee Titans ended their season at 13-3 and second in the AFC Central Division with head coach Jeff Fisher. And were Super Bowl 34 runners-up against the St. Louis Rams. This was a team with Steve McNair, Eddie George at running back, Frank Wycheck at tight end, and the freak Javon Curse. And finally, the 1991 Washington Redskins ended 14-2 with head coach Joe Gibbs, where they won Super Bowl 26 against the Buffalo Bills that went to the Super Bowl 4 times. This was a team with Hall of Fame players like Darryl Green and Pro Bowl players like Mark Rippon, Ernest Biner, and even great return man Brian Mitchell and Art Monk. And those are the teams that are a part of the BTFL. Come join us on Sundays where we show the highlights of the simulated games from Tecmo Bowl on the BTFL. Thank you and have a good day.